The city had that late autumn taste, metal on the tongue, wet leaves stuck to boots, diesel fumes hanging low like a bad memory. The taxi coughed me onto the curb at 1:43 a.m., my gym bag damp under a fine drizzle. I shouldn't have been here. The original plan was a cheap motel near the sports complex, medal ceremony in the morning, then a slow bus home with 9 teenagers stinking of victory and instant noodles. Plans rarely ask for permission. We'd taken the kids to a regional tournament 2 towns over. Everything ran clean until the locker room quiet after the semis, when I found Ethan, thin, careful Ethan, folded over on the floor like a razor snapping shut. The boy's breath sawed through him. Eyes wide, hands clawing. Panic attack, the paramedic said. Not asthma, not heart, stress, pressure, noise, the taste of losing. The boy's mother called crying and begged. Please bring him back tonight. I can't sleep knowing he's there. I couldn't say tomorrow. I never could with parents like that. We hustled a ride. 1 borrowed van, 1 favor cashed in. Half the kids stayed with the assistant coach, and I took Ethan home with 2 others who needed to be back early for school. By the time I dropped them off, the city was more puddle than pavement. I texted my wife, I'll be there by morning. She typed a heart at 10 p.m. I stared at the icon now, a tiny red lie warming my screen. The window over our living room glowed a tired yellow. Lauren always turned lights off like she was saving for a famine. My first thought was she fell asleep with the lamp on. Then I saw the car under our window. Gray sedan. Chip in the windshield like a white crescent. Mark's car. My brother's. He came by sometimes. Always with an easy grin and a paper bag of pastries. Always with a mess of stories and apologies you couldn't stack. It had never bothered me before. The stairwell reeked of old paint and cat piss where the neighbor's Tom claimed the first landing as his church. I took the steps 2 at a time. Music leaked through our door, sweet, sticky pop Lauren played when she ironed or drowned a bad day. I had the key in my palm, a small weight that always felt like promise, and something in me clicked to quiet. The boxer quiet. Air became a tool. Sound went silk. My head felt like I had slipped into a ring and the crowd vanished, leaving only geometry and breath. Through the peephole, warmth, shape, motion. 2 silhouettes on the couch turned toward each other. A man, a woman. He leaned in. Her head tipped back, hair sliding like a curtain. Their mouths met. His hand on her thigh. I didn't need faces. The back of Mark's head was my childhood. The shape of Lauren's shoulder was the map of my home. I put the key into the lock and stopped. The urge to walk in quiet, to deal with this like a surgeon, flickered and died. My shoulder happened before my thoughts did. The doorframe barked. The lock tore out, and the door exploded inward hard enough to shiver the picture frames on the wall. The room smelled like cheap wine and candle wax and the vanilla body spray Lauren bought for little lifts. On the coffee table, a bottle, sweating rings onto an old magazine, 2 glasses, a candle slumping in its own skin. Our wedding photo and a dozen others lay face down like bodies after a raid. Lauren flinched so hard the robe she wore slid from one shoulder. She grabbed at it clumsily, too late to cover the fact that there was nothing else. Mark stood barefoot in an unbuttoned shirt, belt hanging out of the loops like a tongue. It's not. Lauren tried, voice thin and choked. This isn't. Mark echoed, hands up like he was stopping traffic. We were just. I was already moving. The drumline in my head, the one I teach my boys, step, breathe, see, took over. Mark made a step toward me, maybe to explain, maybe to play the older brother card he'd traded on our whole lives. My hand learned his jaw the way a craftsman knows wood grain. Short, clean, bone meets bone. The sound was a dry twig snapping. He fell into the table. The glasses went with a sad, bell-like whine, wine bleeding across the carpet, and Mark slid down into the mess with his mouth open and his eyes empty. Lauren screamed. Not words, not yet. She clutched the robe to her chest like fabric could rewind a life. Elijah, she said, my name breaking against the back of her teeth. Please, please, this isn't what. Don't, I said. My voice came out like brass cooled in water. In the sticky sweetness of that room, fear had a smell, sour, like a dishcloth left too long in a sink. I walked past her to the bedroom. The old suitcase waited under the bed, same one we dragged to a cheap seaside motel during our one good summer. The zipper stuck. I tore it. The closet opened like a throat. Dresses, jeans, The red cardigan I bought her on sale, and she said made her look like a schoolteacher. Bras and underwear, tangled in a way that dared you to think of bodies inside them. Face creams with names like Radiance and Repair. A tin with dried lavender buds from a street market one Saturday, when we were still collecting Saturdays. I threw it all into the suitcase, into another, into a bag. My hands worked like rounds on a heavy bag. No thought, just rhythm. She followed, crying, talking, stepping in front of me, tugging at my sleeves. Please, please, Elijah, it was a mistake. It was just, he came over to talk, and we drank, and I didn't plan this. You flipped the photos, I said. That's planning. She bit her lip so hard a bead of blood jumped. I zipped the suitcase with a yanking sound like a seam tearing. Mark lay on the hallway runner now, one leg folded under him weirdly, breath a wet rattle. I dragged both suitcases to the open door and heaved them into the stairwell. They thumped down the concrete like a pair of dull hearts. Get out, I said. Both of you. I live here, Lauren said, chin up with that small, stubborn dignity people use when the house is already on fire. We both paid. You can leave walking, I said. Or not. That's all the choice you have left. Try it, she said. The bravado flashed and died in her eyes like a match in wind. I didn't hit women. I don't hit women. But I took a fistful of her hair, not gentle, not cruel, just enough, and steered her to the door. She hissed and scraped her nails down my wrist. I lifted her elbow so she wouldn't smash her face on the frame. The night air slapped all three of us with a cold, damp hand. Somewhere a garbage truck groaned. Somewhere a cat cursed in the dark. Mark was heavy in that dead-weight way only the unconscious achieve. He slid across the tile like a sack of river sand. His heel carved a dirty arc across the threshold. I hauled him down the stairs, his head lolling, his breath boozy and hot, his shirt flapping open like a broken wing. The little square of lawn in front of the building received him with a wet slap. He groaned into the grass. The rain made a fine grit on my face. Lauren stumbled out behind me, half-dressed, robe clutched shut with both fists, bare legs streaked with rain and carpet lint. Do not come back, I said. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You, Mark, he managed to turn his head, eyes unfocused. And you. Stay out of my life. Lauren stared up from the grass, hair wild, eyes swollen. She pulled the robe tight, like armor. In another life, I would have looked away out of tenderness. In this one, I looked away out of exhaustion. Everything inside me rattled, and then went quiet. I went back up, shut the exposed door against the jamb, and leaned my forehead on it while the world hissed on the other side. Whispers, whimpers, the sour rattle of a car ignition, someone swearing softly. I ran cold water over my hands until the joints burned and trembled. I felt nothing except the temperature. The neighbor on one kept calling the police at 2:21 a.m. They showed up at 2:42, two pale uniforms with the faces of men who wake up for other people's bad decisions. One sniffed the air and said, "Domestic?" like he was reading a weather report. Lauren had found jeans and a jacket by then. She stood in the hallway talking about shock and misunderstood, while Mark clutched his jaw with two fingers like it might fall off. The officers asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no, as long as they leave. The officers shrugged the way men do when their job is to escort knights to the curb. They did. The building went back to its noises, humming pipes, distant elevator, rain ticking like nails on the window. In the morning I ate dry oatmeal because I could not find the milk without touching the bottle Lauren had bought. I set our wedding photo upright. The glass had a hairline crack through our smiles. I didn't fix it. Cracks sometimes tell the truth better than the picture. They came by in the evening, my parents. Mom knocked like she always had, then let herself in before I reached the door. She smelled like cedar drawer liners and peppermint tea. Dad stood behind her with his cap in his hands. I told them. The words came out flat and efficient. You hit him? Mom asked. She didn't ask why. She never did with Mark. Yes, I said. You hit your brother, she said, as if the nouns were the crime. He had sex with my wife in my house, I said. On my couch, while I was hauling kids across counties. She sighed like a kettle about to scream. Mark is fragile, she said, and the word came dressed as an absolution. You know he's sensitive. You could have talked. You're stronger. You always were. I laughed. This ugly bark that lives in the throat of men who have seen absurdity hit like a truck. Dad kept his eyes on the floor. We can't make like he doesn't exist, he said finally. He's still your brother. And you, he lifted his gaze like it hurt. I don't recognize you right now. They left without hugging me. The apartment smelled like damp wool and old tea. The quiet sank in like cold water. A week later, Mark found me in the wrong kind of alley, the kind the city forgot about when they pressed glass towers into the skyline. I was coming back from the gym late. The wind made knives of the air. Two of his friends peeled off the brick wall behind him, hands stuffed into jackets like hands find weapons on film. The smell of cheap aftershave and fried oil clung to them. Talk, Mark said, jaw blooming green-yellow where the bruise was finishing its sad rainbow. Talk, I said, not stopping. They boxed me in, predictably clumsy on the iced concrete. You humiliated me, Mark said. Mom, Dad, Lauren, you made me look like. You did that yourself, I said. The first friend telegraphed a punch like he was sending a postcard. I caught his fist by the knuckles and let him keep going until his balance ran away. He sat down against the dumpster, blinking at himself. The second came like a door, wide and slow. I stepped inside and crowbarred his ribs with 2 tight shots. The air left him making a surprised little low sound. Mark lunged, a noise halfway between rage and a plea. Technique dies in men who live off excuses. He swung wide. I pressed his shoulder, turned, lifted his wrist, and he went over my hip like laundry. His back hit the grit. He cursed. 5 breaths later they all lay there, steaming in the dark, the cold making halos in the air from their mouth. My heart rate barely ticked above practice. Enough, I said. Just stop. Live however you want. Far from me. I walked away. The night was a mouth filled with the taste of pennies and wind. Fury had burned off and left me with the same thing the cold leaves, rawness. I filed for divorce. Lauren didn't answer calls. Our lawyers existed in a parallel world of crisp files and well-oiled pens. Her attorney sent letters that had to be read twice because they were so smooth they slid out of your grip. Marital property, emotional distress, domestic abuse. The last phrase lodged sideways in my throat. That night in the hallway, she had taken a photo of her wrist, the red on her skin from where I'd hauled her by the hair, and the photo became its own planet around which every fact orbited. The frame didn't care that I hadn't hit her. It cared about the color of skin on film. The judge wore glasses low and read people like paragraphs she had skimmed before. You're a boxing coach? She asked at the first hearing. Yes, I said. And you're telling me you did not hit your wife? It came out without a question mark. I did not, I said. I took her by the hair and put her out of the apartment after finding her having sex with my brother in our living room. Lauren cried softly into a tissue held like a white flag. Mark sat 2 rows behind her in a pressed shirt, looking past the window like the world outside might save him from the one inside. Her attorney dripped courtesy while dismissing my words as speculation. Did I have proof? Video? Witnesses? The security camera in our lobby had been dead for 3 years. The neighbor who had called the cops kept her door shut and her mouth shut. The police report said domestic disturbance, no injuries, no charges. Courts love paper and hate smells. They do not log the wax puddled on your table, or the wine in your carpet, or the way shame makes people turn photos face down. I lost the first hearing and the second. The apartment went into the column called equitable distribution. In equity, some people get all the furniture. Lauren's attorney used the word safety so many times it became decoration. I left the courthouse on March 17th, the air warm enough to carry the smell of wet soil and cigarette smoke from the no smoking sign everyone ignored. My own lawyer squeezed my shoulder with the softness of a man who sends invoices regardless of outcomes. I took the steps down to the street like a man descending from a scaffold that hadn't held. Losing isn't always a punch. Sometimes it is 300 small cuts you only notice when the air stings all of them at once. At the gym, the boys watched me with a new kind of attention. The rumor threads do the work for you. We ran footwork drills. We did breath ladders until the smallest among them stopped rattling. After practice, Ethan came over, scratching the back of his head with fingers still wrapped in tape. Coach, he said, did you really come back early because of me? You and your mom, I said. You two sounded like you needed someone to say yes tonight. Sometimes I still get scared, he said. When I think about the ring. Fear's a room, I said. If you turn the light on, it's just furniture. He nodded like I'd handed him something heavier than advice. My jaw hurt when I smiled. Healing takes its time with men who keep their mouths shut. Lauren called a month after the first hearing. Her voice was ice water, clear and too cold. "Elijah," she said, "I'm coming to collect the rest of my books from the storage closet, and a pause, like a step in the dark. "I'm pregnant." I said nothing. The air got very simple in my lungs. "I don't know whose," she said. "I don't." She stirred a breath into the phone. "I thought you should know." "Okay," I said, and we both knew okay meant there was nothing else I could hold without dropping myself. That night the building hummed. Somewhere fried onions made a smell like childhood dinners. I took out a notebook and wrote a letter to the child as if it were mine and as if it were nobody's. Tell the truth even if it cracks something. Don't turn the picture frames face down because you don't like the angle you're in. Do the work in front of you. You do not have to win to be worthy. You do have to show up. I didn't send it to anyone. I folded it back into the notebook like a bandage you might need later. The last hearing came and went. Stamps thudded, pages turned, my name and Lauren slid across wood. In the eyes of the state, we became separable parts. The court kept calling it resolution. Sometimes a word is just a room with the lights off. Mom texted the night after. "Come by." I went. The kitchen smelled like chicken broth and old laughter. She wore an apron and shame. Dad sat with a coffee. He let go cold. We didn't touch. We just stood there like survivors at a pier. "I was wrong," Mom said finally. I looked at Mark like he was a problem to keep alive and not a man making choices. "I didn't see you. Forgive me." I nodded because sometimes forgiveness is just agreement to stop fighting the same storm. Dad rubbed a ring of wood with his thumb and said, "I don't know how to fight right. I learned to fix things with tools and silence. It doesn't work on people." He looked at me. "Has he come around?" "He has," I said. "It doesn't matter anymore. Lauren came once to take those books. Her belly had a roundness to it that could have been mine or not. We stood like two people outside the wreck of a car, counting what could be salvaged. "You really want nothing shared?" she asked. "I want you calm," I said. "I want the baby healthy. That's enough." Her chin trembled. "I flipped the photos that night so I wouldn't have to see myself," she said. "Not you. Me. I thought if I couldn't see the faces of us, maybe I could pretend I wasn't this person." It didn't work. "Faces don't disappear," I said. She left, and the apartment was quieter than empty. It had the quiet of a gym at dawn, chalk dust, and the smack of old rubber and space waiting to be used. We opened free hours at the gym for kids from the rougher blocks. Two brothers, wiry as broom handles, started showing up with a sister who kept her stance tighter than the boys. They smelled like damp wool and grass. I told them no one hits a back of the head in my space, and no one goes home without water. The old life where we meant my wife and my brother had burned down. I wasn't alone. I had kids who taped their wrists like monks and learned to breathe without apology. I went home carrying shirts soaked with other people's effort. I hung gloves by the radiator. At night I read about teen psychology and wrote drills designed to keep a hand out of the wrong place and a heart inside a ribcage. Sometimes I saw Mark at a bus stop. He turned his face away like the sun burned him. Sometimes I saw Lauren pushing a stroller when spring blossomed in the dull city dirt. We nodded like neighbors. It was correct. The court had taken the furniture and the floor plan. It couldn't take the one piece of ground I kept sweeping clean. I was still me. Ethan won his first city tournament on a night that smelled like wet concrete and cheap hot dogs from the vendor out front. He stood on the podium with his medal grinning like his face had just learned how to open. His gloves were too big and his heart was exactly the right size. I clapped so hard the skin on my palm stung. On the bus back, the boys sang badly in one key. I looked out of the window and saw the city as it was, ugly and sincere and barely holding together. A good place to learn balance. Later, alone again, I took our cracked wedding photo down and set it beside a new picture. My kids after practice, damp hair, wrinkled smiles, tape hanging loose. Between the two frames there was a bridge made of all the nights I could have chosen hate and didn't. I turned off the light and listened to the rain. The rain always comes back. The trick is not pretending you're made of sugar. In the morning the gym smelled like rubber and chalk and the simplest thing in the world, warmth. The boys were there early, hitting the bags with the patience that comes when you realize nobody can save you from your own work. They turned as one when I walked in. Someone yelled, "Coach." I smiled, and the ache in my jaw, my last small piece of that night, finally let go. "Gloves on," I said. "Let's work." And we did.